But sometimes people just won't make the changes that you recommend, and examples of that can be things like changing their diet, because you can see that, for example, one of the players that I worked with when I was working at Chelsea, he had quite clear symptoms of gluten intolerance, and I'm not saying that he didn't follow the advice, because I actually don't know whether he did in the end, but his abdominal wall really wasn't doing what it ought to do for an international footballer. You expect them to have 100% lower abdominal strength and 100% activation of the transverse abdominis and so on, and he had neither of those. And so I explained to him how, he was obviously getting symptoms of hay fever and house dust allergies and things like this, bloating when he ate gluten or drank beer. And I said, maybe you should try cutting out gluten-based foods, because that could be affecting your abdominal wall strength here. I think, if I recall, he's at 60 or 70% lower abdominal wall strength. And like I say, for any athlete, that's not good. But for someone playing at that level, but his injury was a hamstring injury. But because the lower abdominal wall works synergistically with the hamstrings, if the lower abdominal wall's at 70%, well, now the hamstrings, this kind of ties in with your question earlier, now the hamstrings have an additional role to make. So they are one of our primary muscles that drive us forwards in gait. They control rotation at the knee. They control anterior and posterior tilt at the pelvis. They control retraction of the meniscus as we flex and extend the knee. They've just got so many different roles that they have to play. And so then if you then take 70% off, let's say 30% off of the abdominal wall's function because of bloating and reaction to gluten, that's putting a lot of demand on the hamstrings, and sure enough, he ends up with a hamstring strain.
About gluten intolerance, and how does that affect muscle function? Is it just the mechanical effects of bloating?
Yeah, so it's not just the mechanical effects, but I would say that's probably the primary thing. So you get gluten irritates the gut lining. The gut lining is sensitive, and so the beta afferent nerves from the gut create inhibition of the tonic motor neurons at the cord level. And the tonic motor neurons you'll find more in your deep abdominal wall and your deep musculature, as opposed to the phasic motor neurons. So essentially the deep muscles that are involved in stabilization tend to be inhibited by viscerosomatic reflexes. So you get bloating as a result of gluten intolerance, or it could be anything you're intolerant to or that creates irritation in the gut will create bloating, and bloating is inhibition of the abdominal wall primarily. So there's research on this in irritable bowel syndrome, and it shows that 82% of the bloating that people get with irritable bowel syndrome is not due to gas. So 18% is due to gas. The other 82% is due to something else. They don't say what it is in this research, but the only other thing it could be is inhibition of the abdominal wall. What else can make your abdominal wall drop out? It's the musculature switching off. And so it makes sense, because if you've got inflammation and irritation in your gut, the last thing you want to do is compress it. You want to let it go. And so this bloating seems to be related to inhibition from the inflammation.